I am Dania Abul Haj, a lawyer with the International Center of Justice for Palestinians. As we are gathered here tonight, the Palestinian population in Gaza continues to be annihilated by Israel through all available means. Israel's destruction of essential infrastructure in Gaza has continued unabated. And nowhere is this more obvious than the destruction of the healthcare infrastructure. Every hospital in Gaza has been attacked by Israeli forces and has been damaged, destroyed, or either rendered completely dysfunctional. Aid workers and healthcare workers have been deliberately attacked, killed, and injured. Israel's destruction of the medical sector is a critical component of Israel's ongoing genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza. Come to me, Dad, help me. We were targeted by the Israelis, and they are now shooting at us directly. These were the last words of Muhammad, one of the 15 emergency and rescue workers whose fate would remain unknown for over a week until permission was granted by the Israeli military for other rescue workers to go into Rafah and uncover a horrific scene. A mass grave containing the bodies of the 15 first responders buried along with their crushed emergency vehicles. But this is not one isolated incident. This is one of the numerous crimes committed by Israel against humanitarian workers over the past 18 months. These crimes are not hidden. They are known to the world. And yet, 18 months later, Israel continues to carry them out with complete impunity. But there are also stories that are less known. A few months ago, I met with Gazans who were evacuated for medical treatment, genocide survivors. Amongst those, I met with a doctor who worked in the north of Gaza until his evacuation. I hope God forgives me. I hope God forgives me for leaving. I should have never left, he told me. His words still haunt me till this day. And I often wonder how genocide survivors continue to be consumed with survivors' guilt. Today's documentary film reports on the work of paramedics on the front line, capturing their harrowing experiences as they risk their lives to save others. This film sheds light on Israel's targeting of healthcare infrastructure and rescue teams in both Gaza and Lebanon, despite their protection under international law, revealing the devastating toll of the attacks on emergency services. Today, as we watch this documentary, we pay tribute to the immense resilience and the remarkable steadfastness of humanitarian and medical workers in Gaza and all other Palestinians. Now, I would like to welcome our first keynote speaker, David Hearst, Editor-in-Chief of Middle East Eye, and previously at The Guardian for over 25 years, left it as its foreign lead writer.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me. If you're looking for the real purpose behind the continuation of a war that's lasted 18 months and shows no signs of stopping, I would suggest you don't waste your time charting the twists and turns of Netanyahu's relationship with Ben Gvir or Smotrich. You can discount, too, any serious wish to get the remaining hostages back alive, or indeed any serious hope that it would wipe Hamas off the map. It knows it can't do that. I suggest you look at Israel's meticulously planned, premeditated assault on Gaza's 36 hospitals, its paramedics, its ambulances. Israel coldly calculates that if it dismantles the health system, it makes the Strip uninhabitable for over 2 million people. And it could still prove to be right. You can test this assumption in a number of ways. Last autumn, a team of researchers from Harvard plotted the distance between Gaza's hospitals and craters formed by 2,000-pound M84 bombs. These are bombs that the Biden temporarily blocked and that Trump have now resupplied in earnest. An M84 bomb can displace 5 tons of dirt and pancake entire buildings. The paper noted that during the first 6 weeks of the conflict, 84% of Gaza's hospitals were within damage range of at least one crater, and 1/4 were within lethal range. So a physician asked Clayton Dalton, a US doctor who entered Gaza 2 weeks after the January ceasefire, how could you be using these kinds of weapons in this kind of setting and still argue you're adhering to international humanitarian law? Dropping more bombs on Gaza in the first 2 months than was dropped on London, Dresden and Hamburg during the whole of the Second World War turns out to be the least of it. The campaign to dismantle Gaza's healthcare system started on October the 17th, just 10 days after the Hamas attack. A devastating explosion took place in the car park of Al-Ahi Hospital in Gaza City. The Gaza Health Ministry reported that 471 people were killed and 342 people injured, while US intelligence agencies put the number at between 100 and 300. At any rate, the blast was big enough to derail Joe Biden's visit the next day to the region. He had to cancel the Jordan leg of his trip as a result. Now, the first reaction by Israeli officials was to deny responsibility. They said a failed rocket launch by Hamas or Islamic Jihad was responsible for a missile veering off course. They said a salvo of 17 rockets fired from within Gaza were all fired in the direction of the hospital, and one of them was responsible for the blast in the car park. The Israeli military spokesman, Peter Lerner, appeared on CNN and BBC pointing to a still of an Al Jazeera live stream showing a mid-air explosion and claiming this footage was that of the misfiring rocket. These and other more sophisticated lies, like an alleged audio tape of 2 Arab voices talking about the rocket, they turned out to have accents which were not from Gaza, were quickly unraveled by forensic architecture, earshot and al-Haq, which formed the content of a Channel 4 documentary. But the Israeli tactic worked. Sow enough disinformation and get it spread throughout the world, and Biden will continue to supply your Air Force with those M84 bombs. Al-Ahli showed that Israel can target a hospital against every war convention in existence to which it itself is signatory and get away with it. No one blinked. 6 days before, at the Labour Party conference, Keir Starmer told LBC that Israel had the right to withhold water from Gaza, a line he never apologised for publicly, even after the hospital attack. Israel's right to exact the worst collective punishment on a civilian population since Srebrenica became firmly entrenched in the status quo that exists to this day. It's become normal to kill 30 or 100 civilians a night. After the first 2 massacres took place at Al-Shifa, Ehud Barak, former Prime Minister, who poses as a peacenik, went on Newsnight to claim that Hamas's headquarters were in the basement under the hospital, and he knew about this basement because Israeli engineers had built it. These claims, again, could not stand serious scrutiny from independent foreigners who had worked in these hospitals. I recommend that everyone reads a really stunning account of a walkthrough of what remains of the hospital system of Gaza by a US doctor in the New Yorker. In the following passage, Clayton Dalton describes his visit to the Indonesian hospital. He writes, "We entered a large storage room in the corner of an ICU, which was crammed with medical devices, ultrasound machines, IV pumps, dialysis machines, blood pressure monitors. Each had been apparently destroyed by a bullet, not in a pattern one would expect from random shooting, but rather methodically. I was stunned. I couldn't think of any possible military justification for destroying life-saving equipment. When I asked the IDF for comment, A spokesperson said, claims that the IDF deliberately targets medical equipment are unequivocally false. Another claim was made to have found a stash of weapons near an MRI room in a hospital. As any radiologist will tell you, that machine functions with a powerful magnet. No metal object can be allowed anywhere near it, otherwise it disables it. Today, Israel has stopped even bothering to say that Hamas are using hospitals as human shields, bombing hospitals, columns of ambulances, targeting emergency responders has become an internationally tolerated norm. In Lebanon, as we all see from the film we are about to see, Israel bombed 40 hospitals, 8 of whom were forced to close, and 249 emergency vehicles were damaged. Hundreds of workers were killed. Western governments continue to dance a ballet around this fact. This dance allows them to express deep concern without for one moment stopping to supply Israel with the technology, the intelligence, or the weapons it needs to continue the war. Just listen to the reply a British minister gave to a question from a Liberal MP, Tom Morrison, on the 22nd of April this year. Asked by Morrison whether the government supported international legal action, referrals to the ICC against people responsible for violations of international humanitarian law, the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for the Middle East, Hamish Faulkner, replied, "The UK is appalled at the recent killings of aid workers and health workers in Gaza. In our diplomatic engagement with the government of Israel and at the UN Security Council, we've called on Israel to conduct thorough investigations to all incidents involving aid workers and medical personnel and ensure accountability for those responsible." Did his boss, the Foreign Secretary David Lammy, ensure accountability of Gideon Saar, the Israeli Foreign Minister, whom he hosted in London recently? He's a senior member of the Israeli government and part of the cabinet that decided to break the ceasefire agreement with Hamas signed in January. Faulkner went on to say that Britain respected the independence of the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and it was for the ICC prosecutor, having reviewed the evidence, to determine independently who should be prosecuted in accordance with his mandate under the Rome Statutes. But when the ICC prosecutor did just that for Netanyahu and the then Defence Minister Gallant, Britain's reaction was to ignore the ruling. Will Faulkner's deep respect for the ICC mean that Britain now honours its obligations under the Rome Statute to arrest and try Netanyahu and anyone else who participated in this war under an arrest warrant that exists from the international prosecutor of the ICC? Of course it doesn't. And another thing happened during Saar's private, secret official visit to the UK, or rather it didn't happen. The UK media ignored all mention of it. The visit passed unnoticed. For Israel's actions in Gaza are only half the story. The other half is supplied by the battalions of journalists and mainstream media organisations who look the other way. There are honest journalists who do their job under impossible conditions. The Middle East Eye, I'm proud to say, now in its 11th year, could not function without them. But most news media organisations, quite simply, are failing to function. I've worked in a few war zones with the BBC and with Sky crews in Croatia, in Bosnia, in Russia, in Chechnya. I edited much of The Guardian's output during the Second Intifada, and I and my colleagues in the BBC did their job honourably and impartially, as we are all trying to do. We were subject to exactly the same pressures that exist now from exactly the same people. It's not in the DNA of the BBC to be this silent. I can't remember another conflict where their coverage was as incomplete as it is today. You would not know from their coverage that at this very moment, a major battle is taking place in Beit Hanun between Hamas fighters and the Israeli army, because no one's reporting it. The BBC crow that they can't report properly on Gaza or in southern Lebanon because they're not allowed in. But as you'll see from the film, reporters can get in and report, even when bombs are falling. Countless massacres have simply been relegated to a few parts in a sort of he said, she said manner. Their inaction to report the most basic stories helps shroud each massacre in a fog of war. Every time they say the health ministry is Hamas-run, or remind their audience that those figures don't make a difference between civilians and fighters, they cast doubt on a death toll which any impartial investigation has revealed is probably a gross underestimate. At least The Lancet thinks so. So when future generations ask you when the liberal democracies lost their moral compass, when they lost their right to be heard as a moral arbiter of right and wrong, one of the answers will surely be that this happened in 2025, and it happened in Lebanon, and it happened in Gaza. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, David, for these valuable remarks. Now, before we move on, can I please ask everyone to move onto the inside in case some people show up late, so it will be easier for them to take their seats. It's a bit of an inconvenience. But yeah. Thank you, everyone. Now I would like to welcome our second keynote speaker, Professor Avi Shlaim, Israeli-British historian and Emeritus Professor of International Relations at Oxford University.
Good evening. We are gathered here to view and then to discuss a film called Under Fire, Israel's War on Medics. I'm not an expert on this particular aspect of the war, so it was agreed that I shall outline the broader political background to Israel's war in Gaza and in Lebanon. Israel is a settler colonial state, and the logic of settler colonialism is the elimination of the natives in order to take over the land and its resources. And this is what Israel is doing, not just in Gaza, but in the West Bank as well. Noam Chomsky observed that the most extreme and vicious form of imperialism is settler colonialism. And the Palestinians, for the last century, have been at the receiving end of Zionist settler colonialism on the one hand, backed by Western imperialism, first under Britain and then under America, and today by both. The aim of the Zionist movement from the beginning was to establish a Jewish state on as large a part of historic Palestine as possible, with as few Arabs inside its borders as possible. This is what they are doing today in both Gaza and the West Bank. Israel is not part of the region, and it's never wanted to be part of the region, but Israel has never been as alienated from its regional environment as it is today. In the past, Israeli leaders used to claim that their aim is peaceful coexistence with their neighbors. Today, it's quite clear that Israel's aim is not coexistence, but domination and military supremacy. The present government, headed by Benjamin Netanyahu, is the most right-wing government, chauvinistic, expansionist, violent, overtly racist, messianic, and Jewish supremacist government in Israel's entire history. Ever since the Second Intifada in 2000, Israeli society has been moving steadily to the right, and the composition of the present government reflects this shift to the right. The most influential members of this government after Netanyahu are Bezalel Smotrich, the leader of religious Zionism, and Itamar Ben-Gvir, the leader of Jewish power. Ben-Gvir was a disciple of the fascist Rabbi Kahana, whose party was outlawed, whose party Kach was outlawed. And Ben-Gvir was not accepted to do national service in the IDF because he was considered too extreme. Just imagine, he was too extreme, so extreme, he was not admitted to do national service in the IDF. Smotrich and Ben-Gvir are fascists. They are Jewish fascists. And yet, they set the tone for the entire government. Their agenda, which they make no effort to conceal, their agenda is the ethnic cleansing of Gaza and the West Bank, and eventually the formal annexation of the West Bank. Benjamin Netanyahu is not their prisoner. Some people think that he has to go along with them in order to survive politically, but he's as extreme as they are, and he shares their agenda. He has the dubious distinction of being a fugitive from law at home and abroad, because he's on trial in Israel for serious corruption charges, and also, as we heard a minute ago, there is an ICC warrant for his arrest. This government is congenitally incapable of making peace or even sustaining a ceasefire. It is a proponent of permanent conflict and permanent war. Israel claims that it has the right to self-defense, and its Western allies, like Starmer and Lamy, repeat this claim parrot-like. But Israel does not enjoy the right to self-defense, because under international law, you have the right to self-defense if you are attacked by another country. This clearly is not the case. Nor do you have the right to self-defense if the attack comes from an area under your occupation. Nor is this a war between Israel and Hamas. Like its previous 7 military offensives, since Hearst led in 2008, this is an assault on the whole people of Gaza. The declared aim of this war is the eradication of Hamas, and this aim is clearly unattainable. The real aim is to render the enclave uninhabitable and the ethnic cleansing of the enclave. It used to be fashionable to say that the Gaza Strip is an open-air prison, the biggest open-air prison in the world. But in prison, at least the inmates have physical security, they get water and food, and they get some medical attention. None of these apply in the case of the civilians of Gaza. Israel has turned Gaza into a wasteland and into a mass grave. The carnage and the destruction exceed the total of the last 7 military offensives. Statistics tell only part of the story. The IDF has killed over 50,000 people, and about 18,000 of whom are children. 70% of the casualties are women and children. This is a war on children, and killing children is not an acceptable form of self-defense. Israel has destroyed or damaged or destroyed 70% of the housing in Gaza. The IDF has moved, evacuated, or insisted on the removal of 2 million out of 2.3 million inhabitants of Gaza. Some of them were forced to move 10 times or even more, and many of them, having obeyed the orders to move to so-called safe area, were bombed by the Israeli army. And the forcible removal of civilians, is a war crime that Israel commits every day for the last 18 months. Israel has been committing multiple war crimes in Gaza. Domicide, which is the destruction of houses. Ecocide, which is the destruction of the environment. Econocide, which is the destruction of the economy. And the crime of all crimes, genocide. Israel and its friends, of course, deny the charge of genocide. But the leading Israeli experts on genocide and the Holocaust have said categorically that this is a classic example of genocide. The ICJ, in its ruling on the South African claim, has concluded that South Africa made a plausible case that there is genocide going on in Gaza, and the ICJ issued orders for preliminary orders on Israel to stop the genocide, orders that Israel has repeatedly ignored. But most importantly, the Convention for the Prevention of Genocide defines it as the intent to destroy a racial, ethnic, or religious group in whole or in part. That's the definition. This is precisely what Israel is doing. Israel is using starvation as a weapon of war. If this is not genocide, I don't know what is. Another aspect of Israel's crime in Gaza, which is of particular interest to me, is scholasticide. Scholasticide, the systematic destruction of the educational system of a society. And Israel has bombed, damaged, or destroyed all 12 universities in Gaza, all 12 universities without a single exception. Israel has also damaged or destroyed 512 schools. It has killed hundreds of academic staff and university staff, and thousands of students. I've written an article about scholasticide in Gaza in the Journal of the British Academy, giving a lot more details. I don't need to remind you of the importance of education in Palestinian society, the importance of education for the development of this society. And it is precisely because of the importance of education that Israel is so determined, so vicious in its destruction, in its pursuit of scholasticide in Gaza. Israel's attack on the health system in Gaza has been just as systematic and just as devastating as its attack on the educational system. Dr. Hassan Abu is here. He is the great expert. He has worked as a surgeon both in Gaza and in Lebanon, and I look forward to hearing what he has to say on the subject in the panel. But for now, I want to make just one point. Israel is killing doctors and nurses and medics and bombing, and at the same time, bombing medical schools in order to prevent the training of new medical staff to replace the ones that it had killed. If this is not genocide, I don't know what is. In Lebanon, Israel is repeating its criminal behavior in Gaza. Its aim is the ethnic cleansing of the South Lebanon, and to this end, it deems it necessary to destroy the health system. The film that we're about to see, Under Fire, Israel's War on Medics, exposes the extreme brutality and savagery. I would say it exposes the sadism of Israel's repeated attacks on the health system in Lebanon. This is not a war just against Hezbollah, but against the whole of Lebanese society. The key point is Israel's refusal to distinguish between combatants and non-combatants. The whole of international humanitarian law revolves around this distinction and is designed to protect civilians. Now, a central IDF military doctrine is the Dania doctrine, named after the Lebanese village which was devastated by Israel during the Second Lebanon War of 2006. The doctrine calls for the use of massive, disproportionate force and the deliberate targeting of civilians and civilian infrastructure. This is clearly a criminal doctrine, and it amounts to a root and branch rejection of the entire body of international humanitarian law. This doctrine helps to explain, but it most certainly does not justify Israel's savage war on the medics in Gaza and Lebanon. Israel's attacks on civilians and of medics as well, medics included, maybe especially medics, are not acts of self-defense, they are acts of state terrorism. To sum up, Israel is a racist and violent settler colonial state. It embodies an extreme form of ethno-nationalism. For the past 18 months, Israel has been conducting a genocidal campaign against the Palestinian people, and in the process, it has shredded to pieces the so-called rule-based international order. Yet, it has not been called to account. It has not been subjected to sanctions. It is getting away literally with murder due to the impotence of the international community and to the active support of its Western allies. America and Britain are not just complicit in Israel's war crimes, they are active partners in these war crimes. So, like Israel, America and Britain are likely to go down on the wrong side of history. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Professor Avi. That was very insightful. Now we will show a recorded message from Dr. Munir al-Bursh in Gaza, Director General of the Palestinian Ministry of Health.
السادة الكرام في الميدل إيست الإيفنت المنظم لهذا المؤتمر. الحقيقة نحن في قطاع غزة ومحدثكم الدكتور منير البرش مدير عام وزارة الصحة الفلسطينية. أحدثكم من داخل المستشفى الأندونيسي، هذا المستشفى الذي دمره الاحتلال 3 مرات على 3 مراحل، وأعدنا ترميمه وأعدنا بناءه وتشغيله للمرة الثالثة. منذ أكتوبر تم يعني استشهاد أكثر من 51,000 شهيد في قطاع غزة الذي يسكنه ما يقارب 2,400,000 نسمة. الحقيقة الاحتلال الإسرائيلي استهدف منذ اللحظة الأولى المنظومة الصحية، جعل سياسة ممنهجة لاستهداف المنظومة الصحية، وأنا كنت شاهدا على هذا الاستهداف منذ اللحظة الأولى. تم حصارنا في مستشفى الشفاء وخروجنا من مستشفى الشفاء، بعد ذلك تم حصارنا في هذا المستشفى الأندونيسي، تم حصارنا في مستشفى كمال عدوان، وتم حصار مستشفى المعمداني، ومن ثم انتقل إلى جنوب غزة فحاصر مستشفى ناصر ومستشفى الهلال الأحمر الفلسطيني، مستشفى الأمل، ومستشفى أبو يوسف النجار في رفح، وأيضا مستشفى الهلال الأحمر الإماراتي أيضا في رفح. الحقيقة كانت سياسة ممنهجة مخطط إليها مسبقا، تبدأ بقصف المستشفى وحصاره لأيام وخروج المرضى والمصابين. كان يتواصل معنا الاحتلال الإسرائيلي من أجل إخراج الناس النازحين وإخراج المرضى في ظروف كانت مهينة وتحت إطلاق النار وتحت فوهات البنادق والقناصة الإسرائيلية. الاحتلال قتل داخل المستشفى، وأنا شاهد على هذا الأمر. في هذا المستشفى عندما اقتحمه قتل 2 على أسرة المرضى، إحداهما امرأة كانت من دار شاهين، من عائلة شاهين، وقتلها عندما استنجدت به فأطلق الرصاص مباشرة عليها وماتت على سرير العلاج. الحقيقة الاحتلال الإسرائيلي منذ بداية الحرب كان قد استهدف المستشفيات. فقدنا ما يقارب 1400 شهيد من كوادرنا الصحية، من بينهم 150 طبيب، 221 ممرض، أعداد كبيرة من الصيادلة والمسعفين. تم اعتقال 360 من كوادرنا الصحية على رأسهم الدكتور حسام أبو صفية. من طواقم الإسعاف والفرق الإنسانية تم قتل أكثر من 1300 شخص. يعني نجدد في وزارة الصحة والقائمين عليها دعوتنا للمجتمع الدولي، دعوتنا لمؤتمركم الكريم، دعوتنا إلى منظمات الصحة العالمية بالتدخل العاجل والفوري لوقف هذا التدهور، وهو تدهور متسارع عندما نعلم أن إسرائيل أو الاحتلال الإسرائيلي يغلق غزة لشهر ونصف الآن، ويمنع دخول الدواء ويمنع دخول الماء. وكما قال يعني وزير الاحتلال نريد أن نمنع عنهم دخول حبة القمح. وأيضا هناك وزير آخر يقول أننا نريد أن نمنع عنهم ضوء الشمس. فهذا الاحتلال الذي يعني أراد عبر هذه السياسة الممنهجة في قتل وتدمير وإبادة جماعية وتطهير عرقي للشعب الفلسطيني يهدف بالأساس إلى التهجير، وأعلن عنه ذلك، يهدف بشكل واضح إلى التهجير، فيريد أن يضيق فيزيد الخناق على شعبنا في غزة ليسهل عليه عملية التهجير. فهو يدمر المستشفيات لإفقاد الناس مقومات الصمود ويسهل عليه عملية التهجير بشكل واضح. فلذلك يعني لابد من تدخل واضح من قبل الجميع، لأن الوضع الحالي هو الأصعب والأشد على غزة. هو واقع، وأنا أشبهه أن غزة يعني تلفظ أنفاسها الأخيرة، لأن الأمور سيكون انعكاساتها ومضاعفاتها بشكل واضح وكبير. سيكون انهيارات في فئات كبيرة جدا، تبدأ في الفئات الهشة، ومن ثم تنتقل إلى الموت الجماعي. وهذا فيه هناك بوادر وهناك مؤشرات، وخاصة عندما نرى هذا الموت في عدد الأطفال بسبب سوء التغذية. هناك أسر فلسطينية يعني تعرضت لمجازر، مسحت بالكامل، ما يقارب 2303 أسر يعني مسحت بشكل كامل من السجل المدني. هناك أسر لم يبقى منها إلا ناجي وحيد، وهذا المصطلح أصبح يعني دارجا. هناك ناجي وحيد، ما يقارب 5307 من هذه الأسر يعني لم يبقى منها إلا ناجي وحيد. نحن من خلالكم يعني نطالب عبر مؤتمركم الحماية الفورية للكوادر الصحية، الحماية للمنشآت الصحية، قبل ذلك وقف إطلاق النار وفتح المعابر مباشرة، وإدخال الإمداد والغذاء والدواء والماء لكل غزة. أيضا بحماية هذه الكوادر الطبية التي لم تستطع ولن تخلع معاطفها البيضاء حتى اللحظة. بارك الله فيكم وشكرا لكم، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.